everybody. Welcome to our very first session of Luminary or Logistics Luminaries Live. So we'll get started in just a second here. We've got a couple of people rolling in, and we will also be recording this. You should have gotten the audio prompt when you came in. We'll be recording this and posting this in the platform later, so you or others that want to revisit certain things that are shared or kind of catch up on something that you might have missed have a chance to do that too. Okay, so I am Holly LaBoda, one half of the Luminaries consulting team, who is the company behind the Logistics Sales Academy. So if you're here, you are a member or a trial member of Logistics Sales Academy's new All Access Pass, and this is part of some of the benefit you get from being in that program. So the Logistics Sales Academy All Access Pass is learning content, playbook resources, live community networking, and some live tools like this to kind of just help you do your jobs better as logistics salespeople and account managers. So this particular series we were really excited about putting together because the reason behind this Logistics Luminaries Live is there are so many people in our complicated and dynamic industry that are doing just really cool things. Thought leaders, people that have done really cool things in their careers, people that we can all learn from all of the time. So this series that will be again exclusive to the platform is really just designed to showcase some of those thought leaders. So what have you done in your career? What have you learned? What advice would you give to salespeople and account managers to do their jobs more effectively? So that's kind of the goal behind this particular session. And I'm so excited that my friend Blythe Brumleve has agreed to join us as our very first Logistics Luminary to be a part of this live platform. So Blythe, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, especially as part of the first one. I'm honored to speak with your group and figure out how we can I guess align marketing and sales much more closely.
Yeah, absolutely. That is always a hot topic. So Blythe and I know each other predominantly from the Transportation Marketing and Sales Association, although our industry is pretty small and we all see each other everywhere. But that is always something that we talk about at TMSA is that like marketing and sales alignment, or how do we all kind of work better together to serve the customer? So always something that comes up for sure. So Blythe, that's kind of how we know each other and how I like thought of getting you involved in this and why I was excited to have you on this platform. But maybe before we jump into a couple of the topic areas that we talked about, can you kind of share a little bit about yourself, your backstory, and what you do for those that might not know you?
Sure. So hi for folks who don't know me. I am the founder of a company called Digital Dispatch, which is a website management platform, and then I'm also the host of a podcast called Everything is Logistics. I got my start in this industry in logistics about 15 years ago. I was working at an asset-based 3PL. I was an executive assistant, and I took the job because I thought that it was going to be a situation where I wouldn't be stuck at a desk all day. I was a former waitress that started working at a logistics company, and I didn't know anything about the industry. But I sort of coincidentally, I had a sports and entertainment blog on the side that launched the very same week that I started as an executive assistant. So when my boss found out what I was doing on the side, typically, sometimes bosses will be like, no, don't, you shouldn't have any other sort of side gigs or anything like that. But he loved that concept,
Mm.
loved that idea, that initiative. And so he said, well, why don't you start doing all of the marketing for our company? I had no idea what I was doing. It was sort of a trial by fire, throw you in the deep end and see if you can swim. And that's how I got my start in freight marketing. And it's just sort of evolved ever since.
Yeah, I love that. It's that's a unique situation, of course. You had kind of this side hustle and it kind of created your day job to be something a little bit different. But I feel like that like the undertone of that story, kind of like stumbling into this industry in our focus area accidentally is definitely one that's prevalent throughout our industry. It's just something about it that like grabs people. So that's pretty fun that that's your background.
Yeah, it was definitely like my cousin was already working at the company and she wanted me to get out of waitressing. She wanted me to get, settle down into a serious role. And so yeah, I really have her to thank for it. And then my mentor still is my former boss, who was a truck driver who had worked his way up in the company and ended up taking over and owning the company. So it was really like sort of that entrepreneurial spirit. And that's what I sort of hone in on my own career. And then also from the marketing and sales sales aspect. So I really tried to be the owner. I mean, I am the owner, but I tried to be, that ownership mentality of the sales are go through me, the marketing goes through me, and then how can we start to delegate some of these responsibilities that I don't necessarily need to be involved in. And so that's sort of the growing pains I'm going through right now. But I wouldn't be here without that sort of trial by fire all those years ago.
Right, right. I love that. So, well, let's talk about that for a second. We have a number of kind of topics lined up that Blythe and I prepped. And for folks that are joining us and watching in, if you have particular questions for Blythe or things you want us to talk about, feel free to chat them in. We'll watch those things. You can use the chat and we'll kind of dig in there for a second. So, we'll get to some of those topics in just a second. But as you started to go down this path, we're all kind of, whether we're owning our own businesses or whatever our personal focus is, like expanding kind of our current focus to like higher potential, higher revenue, value creation items and shedding some of the lower revenue or lower value creation items, I think is something we can all kind of agree is part of our story or part of where we need to focus on. So, what do you do? How do you do that right now? How do you decide which pieces have to be Blythe and which pieces could be someone else?
It really starts with like process documentation. It's sort of the bane of my existence, but I also really love it because it's the first time, especially over the last couple of years, that I ask myself, okay, when I am pursuing a new customer, what does that look like
Mm.
from a very step by step level? And you think you have all of the steps mapped out until you ask someone else to do those same task and they have a slew of questions. And so that's it's a process refinement, I should say. So documentation and then also refinement on those capabilities. And so that's where I have spent the better part of the last year just trying to figure out, what makes sense for what do I have to do? What do I want to do? And then what can be offloaded to someone else. And so that's where I put myself into different buckets and I really try to time block my entire week. So I treat it as, each day I have a to-do list, each week I have a to-do list of major things that I want to get done. I try to structure my days in a way that I can get those important things done because I'm always going to have a to-do list of a million things I want to get done. And, my fiance sort of makes fun of me. He says, I don't think that there's enough hours in the day for you to get done everything that you want to get done. So I used to really beat myself up if I didn't complete that task, that to-do list at the end of the day. And so now I've just gotten better about just structuring my week of on a Sunday each week, I will say to myself, what are the things that I absolutely have to get done, both personal and work wise? And then I try to structure my days and set up my days around that. So, we were kind of talking before we started recording that like Mondays and Fridays, I block off. So Mondays are just client days. I am addressing everything that my clients are have coming up, or maybe, we've already been working on a project. So updates, making sure everything's on schedule. And then Fridays, I really block off as like the big picture items, the things that I need to do, deep work around. Being a
Yeah.
creator, you have to have that time in order to really think about those big picture projects, those big picture sort of content initiatives and how that fits into the overall revenue plan, right? Because why are you even creating content essentially if there's not revenue behind it?
Right.
Otherwise it's just a hobby. And so that's been a big game changer for me, is just flipping the switch and saying, okay, how are we going to justify this with revenue? And I can't put an exact dollar amount behind every piece of content. I would like to, but that is just a part of like the overall structure of how I make up my days, make up my weeks, and then hopefully those weeks turn into months and we can kind of tackle the projects, sort of like they say, how do you eat an elephant, one bite at a time. And so that's how I try to structure those big picture projects that I can devote on Fridays. And then, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday is sales meetings, podcast recording. And so that's how I try to structure that time allotment out. But the most important thing is the first thing I'm going to do in the morning. And then everything else is, I'm kind of seeing if there's any fires I can put out.
Yeah, I love that. And the kind of the undertone that I'm hearing of everything that you're saying here is like really being intentional.
Mhm.
And we talk about that a lot with how we spend our time, how we reach out to people, like basically everything in our lives. It requires like it's better if it's intentional. And if you're intentional about not just your structure, but your priorities and how they fit into that and how you can achieve them with your structure, I think you'll go a long ways. We're never all going to be caught up in life. I feel like that's elusive. If you've figured out how to do that, like more power to you. I've never been there. But I think intentionality, if that's even a word, really kind of gets us so much further down that path.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that mindset of if you say yes to something, then you are saying no to something else. And so for, a couple months, like I just got done with a bunch of conference travel, like I had that had to be my yes. And so I had to
Mhm.
say no to personal projects that I really want to work on, but I just didn't have the bandwidth at the time. So now I'm sort of moving into, okay, well, my conference travel is done for a little while. Now I can focus more energy and time on those projects that, I kind of want to invest in. I kind of want to roll the dice on. I'm an entrepreneur at heart, and I want to place some bets in some different areas. And with the power of AI, like I'm able to make those bets quicker and be more agile and be able to get the product done faster because of these new tools that have entered the market.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I want to learn a lot more about that with you. But one of the things that like I is kind of one of my mantras, at least over the last decade, is like you can do anything, but you can't do everything. So it's kind of exactly what you're saying. You say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. Let's just be thoughtful and strategic about what we're saying yes to and make sure it aligns with our priorities and our intentions. So I love that. Okay, so let's go down that path a little bit further and talk about some of these things that I think will really resonate with our salespeople and account managers. So obviously, as a marketing maven, is I think what I called you
Oh,
when
thanks.
I was posting about this. I love that. But this content creation and using content, creating content is very like near and dear to you, and you actually like you go down that path full bore and create a lot of original content more than a lot of other people out there, at least that I see. So talk to us about that for a second, not just like the content creation, because you know more about marketing than anybody else on this call, most likely, but like think about it from the salespeople and account managers lens, because I know
Mhm.
you sell in your business and that kind of thing too. So if you're a salesperson or account manager, how could you leverage content that you create, you find, your marketing team creates? How can you use that with customers, and how does that help?
So I am of the opinion that I believe that the lines between marketing and sales are increasingly getting blurred. And you have to have that certain skill set in both sales and marketing in order to put yourself out there, especially from a personal branding perspective. Most marketing teams, especially in logistics, are teams of one or fewer. That was exactly my role when I first got started. It's still kind of my role today. I'm lucky enough to have a digital marketing assistant now, but I'm a firm believer in that good content creates good customers. And so you are attracting the customers that you want to genuinely work with simply by the content that you create. And I'm not just talking about sort of in a video setting like what we're doing here, which is very advanced as far as like content is concerned. There's lots of different ways to make content, whether it's text or image or meme based. That's obviously seen a lot of growth in the last couple of years, email based as well. But it really is about talking to your customers as simple as it sounds. It's also very challenging from a time blocking perspective. But luckily, over the last year, it has really been, I swear, it's been such a game changer for me that I have switched from having a lingo library, which is where you're having these regular conversations with your leads and you're writing down the phrases that they use. And so the reason I do that, or the reason I've done that for years, is because, I'm making this content, I'm putting it out into the world, and then I'm having conversations with leads. What are those leads then asking? Because they've heard, they've seen and heard my content. So then they're booking calls with me. They're coming to me, which is, I think, from a sales perspective, that's exactly what you want is folks coming to you to do business with you and giving you those signals. But then it makes a little bit more work because you have to constantly refine it. And so I use a lingo library, which is just a very simple Google Doc. And I have different buckets of what kind of person that I'm talking to. Am I talking to, a C-suite executive? Am I talking to a sales rep? Am I talking to, a manager or a subject matter expert within a company? Or is it, maybe a founding team or, a very small team? So I keep those different buckets of who I'm talking about, those jobs to be done. And then I write down the specific phrases that they're using, because in logistics, we can get so caught up with our own lingo, and the customers, though, they don't understand it. They don't, a lot of the time, they don't understand the different phrases that we're using because we're so ingrained in it. So I found that if I speak in their same lingo, then chances are there's other customers that are speaking in that same lingo as well. So I
Yep.
use the lingo library to kind of be my guide as to how to create my social media posts, my email marketing, my website copy, using all of those different touch points and using their language to speak to them. And then, that's sort of been super powered over the last year because I've started using AI note taking tools where I
Mhm.
can focus in intently on the conversation, and then I can go back through the transcript of the conversation, and then I can pull out those little nuggets of information. And then, there's so much more that I could do with that contextual, sort of meeting data that I'm able to now. I have a folder just for podcast transcripts. I have a folder just for customer conversations. I have a folder for sales, leads and prospects. So I'm starting to categorize all of those different conversations, and then have greater plans to, sort of build out, try to duplicate myself using AI. I know that's probably, an advanced sort of area, but I think it all starts with thinking about the language that your customers are using. And, Firefly, Otter AI, some of these other note-taking apps that can automatically join the meeting and be able to give you takeaways and give you a summary of those questions. That is been such a game changer for me because now it's completely contextualized. So my lingo library that I've used for the past like 5 years has now evolved into more of a formal note-taking system that I can do more with that contextual data, which I think is just going to be such a blessing for sales and marketing teams, especially from the
Yeah.
marketing perspective. If they're, a one-person team and you're looking to, give help from the sales perspective to your marketing team, that's the best way to do it, is just give them access to your meeting notes.
Right. I love that. I love that. And, I think AI can be really intimidating, especially for people that don't spend all the time thinking about it, right? But I think little things like that can help us do our jobs better, kind of help us shed the bottom 10% of our value so we can add more to the top, I think are super powerful. I love the concept of like thinking about the words that your customer is using. That's something that we talk about a lot, something I personally do. Sarah and I both do, and when we're talking with clients, is not just think about, they're talking about they're hiring a bunch of people, for example. Onboarding might be my term, but they're calling it a new hire roadmap. So let's call it that so they don't kind of have to figure out what I'm talking about the next time we talk to them. So sometimes it can be really hard to get out of your own head. But again, if you're doing it super intentionally, it really kind of minimizes that potential barrier between like whatever the customer is thinking in their language and what you're thinking with your solutions. I think it helps connect it. But your lingo library and then AI kind of take those concepts to the next level, which I think are really powerful, useful tools for folks. So thanks for that recommendation.
Absolutely. I swear that they're not paying me to say that, but I feel like they should because I talk about it all the time, how much it's helped me. And then, with where AI is going, developing, custom chat bots that sit on top of your website that can use, a lot of the frequently asked questions that come on your sales calls. Being able to answer those immediately on a website using, an AI powered chat bot will help, sales folks have meetings that are more impactful instead of getting on another call with someone who isn't going to be a good fit.
Right, right, absolutely. And I think any salesperson would love anything that would stop them from wasting time with people who are never going to buy from tire
Same.
kickers. Yeah, everybody would love that. That's great. Okay, so I want to jump on to another topic, kind of further down this vein a little bit too. So you're really focused on kind of what the folks that you're talking to are worried about, what concerns they have, what kind of words they're using. One of the things that I know is kind of a passion topic for you, and we also talk a lot about, is this concept of storytelling. So what does that mean to you? How do you use storytelling? If you do, what do you want to how would you like to use it more? What does it do for your business? Kind of talk to me a little bit about that.
So I tend to go for the use cases of how, and I'm lucky and that I'm a full-time podcaster now. And so I get to have these conversations with folks who have come up in the industry, or maybe they just got started. There's all different ways that folks enter this industry. And so from a storytelling perspective, the stories just go so much further. I can, hit you over the head with stats galore, but it really is the story behind those stats in how people remember them. And so it's always important that, especially for other folks out there, that you're telling a story along with the stats that you're giving people. I learned this when I covered sports, that I didn't care that someone hit, I don't know, or 20 home runs in a month, but were they dealing with the loss of their father, and then all of a sudden they hit 20 home runs in a month? So they were able to overcome that extreme, life crisis moment and be able to turn that into a positive. That's an example of taking a data point and adding a story behind it to make it much more impactful, because chances are people are going to remember the story. They're not going to remember the data point behind it unless there's a story attached to it. At the end of the day, people still do business with other people. They don't do necessarily business with just, stats on a website, or, the lines on a profit and loss statement. You really have to be able to provide that context around those different data points. So that's where really storytelling is very impactful, and just generally just caring about people. I think that is something that is sort of lost on a lot of folks within our industry. Is just, how can I get this business and then move on to the next? It's very transactional. But if using, all of these different new tools that are coming into the play, that are going to, allow you to free up some of your time, that time should give you back that ability to invest it in the people you're doing business with. It sounds really simple. It sounds really easy, but we can often, be our own worst enemy. But asking how somebody's kids are, asking, the event that they have coming up, did you have a good time? Asking them about their personal life, or their hobby, or their favorite sports team. Showing that you care about them more than just a transactional point, is something that you can only get by investing time. And so, from my perspective, it's using these tools on the side, like, a note-taking app or whatever, that's going to help
Yeah.
you in those different processes, but it should give you back that time to be able to invest in the things that aren't necessarily scalable. Because I think that those, with the sort of the adoption of all of these automated tools, people crave the personal touch. They crave the in-person nature, that you care about them, that you're not just another number in their database. And so I think that that's sort of the future, is that we're going to use these tools to free up some of that time, but then you should be taking that time and reinvesting it back into learning about your own customer stories and your own prospect stories. And so then that way they can feel like you're investing in them as well. And this is going to be a good working relationship now and in the foreseeable future.
Right, absolutely. The time saving is one big part of it, but it's also even like the kind of the mental capacity of it. Like I know I have my note taker, so I don't have to be obsessed about what this next step that I'm going to forget to write down is. I can focus on the person that I'm talking to really have that genuine connection. And I think that's even more important as we all get busier, because we all do every year, but also because a lot of our connections are now virtual. So I think even again, you have to be very intentional about focusing on that person when there's a million distractions that could be pulling your focus, or they're happening, at a conference when there's 1,000 other people around and you're exhausted after 3 days. Like some of those kind of things that make it harder to have like the genuine connection that you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. With these tools, they should allow you to have more time, but how do you invest that time? And I think that is the important step that more folks need to be thinking about, because we are entering into an era where a lot of these things are going to be automated, maybe not now, but in the next couple of years. And so how are you making yourself valuable? And I think, having that genuine connection with people is going to be one of those touch points, and investing in the things that aren't scalable with that free time that you're now allotted from doing the mundane task.
Yep, absolutely. I think that's really good advice. So we've just got a couple of minutes left. So let me ask you that. So you worked with a lot of different logistics companies, you work in logistics companies. As you think about salespeople and account managers who are selling logistics services or managing logistics customers, what would you like to see more of, less of in our industry? What kind of advice would you give?
I know people are probably overwhelmed, but I am 100% in the camp of start a podcast. I
Mm.
know there might be folks that are going to roll their eyes as soon as I say that, but I come from Joe Lynch, who is the host of the Logistics of Logistics show. He recently said on one of our episodes that I would still do this podcast even if no one listened. And that's
Mm.
because of the valuable insight that you get from having these customer conversations. And so even if you're not going to seriously start up a podcast where you're recording and you got all the lights and cameras and things like that, but you're still doing Zoom. Everybody does Zoom. Everybody does, remote meetings, Teams, Google Meet, whatever software that you're using. Everybody is using those tools. So use that as a way to connect with your customers as well. And then from that aspect, you can pull so many insights from those conversations. You can use a note-taking app tool to, record those conversations and pull data from them. Or you can use it from the lens of, I'm going to record this conversation, but I'm only going to share how I answer the client or the customer or the prospect's questions. And so then you can take that clip of you answering a question, and then you can use that as your content to promote how you solve problems and build up your personal brand. Smart companies today are allowing their sales teams to create content and to build up that personal brand awareness because they know that personal brand awareness is so much more powerful than typically a company page or the reach that a company page has online. Your people will have so much more of a reach than that, and it has exponential effects on it. Not just that you're connecting with your prospect in that moment, but you're answering questions that maybe some other prospects don't that have but just haven't had a meeting with you yet. You're also showcasing to maybe other employees that want to work for your company that, hey, we're allowed to talk about these things, we're allowed to promote ourselves. So that's attractive from a recruiting perspective. Just from the knowledge that you gain from recording conversations and then being able to share that expertise out into social, to email, and being the thought leader to your customer and setting your customer up for success so that they're the smart person in the room at their company. And so being knowledgeable, paying attention to industry news, having these conversations with other prospects, and then sharing that insight, whether it's in an email or on social media, then you can set yourself up as the expert. But then as a bonus, you can also set your customer contact as an expert within their company and make them look smart, which solidifies that relationship between the two of you as well. So I'm a big fan of recording conversations, obviously with permission, of course, and then using that as a way to market yourself and market your solutions and how you solve problems, because that's all what logistics is solving problems.
Right, right. I love that. I love that, you said earlier, people buy from people. So not being afraid to kind of lead with your own personal brand, with, as long as your company supports it and try to get them to, I think is great advice. And I think we all also typically kind of underestimate our own knowledge base. So even just taking some of those things, like you don't have to spend time thinking about, oh my gosh, what do my customers want to hear? You're answering a question in that moment with the knowledge that you have. So leverage the thing that you already did in a different way and share that with other people. I think that's really great advice. So we have to wrap up. That went really, really fast.
Like that.
Blythe, where can people find you if they want to hear more information?
Sure. So you can check out everythingislogistics.com. That's where all of my social and podcast episodes, they drop there. We drop 2 episodes every single week. And so if you want to find out more information or stay updated, all my socials, email, newsletter is all there. Everythingislogistics.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me. This was a lot of fun. And thank you for being our official first logistics luminary. Love
Thank you
it.
so much for having me.
Yes, absolutely. We got some comments here saying thank you. So thank you again, Blythe. Thank you, everyone who joined. And this will be posted in the group if you want to revisit it. So have a good day.